Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
Ma'am, I have a question. Hello, ma'am. I have a question.
Reminder, the first draft is due by midnight. Sorry, I didn't have my speaker on. It should work now. Forgot to turn it on. Maybe I have it on.
Hello, can you hear me now? Ma'am, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Anurag.
Oh, okay, ma'am. Right. I don't think ma'am can hear us.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think you might want to type in the chat.
Yeah.
Apparently not. If you guys are talking to me, I am not hearing you. Let me see if I can figure out what's going on. Let me check my audio. Okay, somebody say something.
Good morning.
Ah, thank you very much, Lizzie. It's working now. Not sure if I had it turned off or. Okay, Orlando, did you have a question? No.
No, I didn't have a question.
Okay. All right. Today I want to talk about, now that you have hopefully your first draft down and some of your explanations of both sides of your controversy, let's look at the organization format, the choices that you have for making sure, if you haven't already organized it. So if you'll recall in the instructions, I gave you two options for organizing it. Okay. Block by block means you give me all of the information on one side of your issue, and then you give me another block explaining the opposite side. Now, this example is just a framework. Yours is going to be more in-depth and it's going to have evidence from sources. This one does not. It just has a basic explanation. So for example, you're still going to have an intro paragraph, right? So this one's on abortion and it's not narrowed down. You guys will have a more narrowed down issue, right? Like we talked about. So one of the most divisive issues in America is the controversy surrounding abortion. Okay, that's the thesis. It tells us what exactly they're going to talk about in the paper. Gives us some background information as the intro. It's legal in America. Many people believe it should remain legal. Other people believe that it should not. Some people are lobbying Congress to pass laws to make it illegal. And so then we have one block that explains the pro-choice perspective. Okay, so it's basically summarizing the argument. Your paper will be more detailed. So whereas this is one paragraph, if you choose to do the block organization, you would have multiple paragraphs explaining at least 3 and possibly 4 points for the pro-choice side of this issue in this case, as an example. And then when you're done explaining that in several paragraphs, you will move to the pro-life side of the issue and what their beliefs are on certain points, okay? And then a conclusion, and this one basically just asks questions. Remember, speculating on the future. If we take away the woman's right to choose, will we begin limiting her other rights also? Or if we keep abortion legal, are we devaluing human life? It's sort of asking questions about the essential nature of the topic. Okay, so just understand this is not like a literal example that you'll be using. Yours will be, you know, pages where you explain this side and several more pages where you explain this one. Okay, so that's one option. One block that talks about everything on the pro-choice side, one that talks about everything on the pro-life side for your issue, whatever those sides are. Or same thing here, same introduction, okay, but then they take it point by point. So they talk about supporters of pro-life and pro-choice refer to religion as a support for their side of the argument. So what they've done is pulled out one point that both sides have opinions on and opposing opinions, and then they're going to explain. So you might have one paragraph that explains the pro-life supporters' claims regarding religion, and another paragraph that explains the pro-choice side and what their beliefs are about this issue regarding religion. Okay, so instead of having all of one side and then all of the other, you go back and forth between several points. One's on religion, this one's on personal rights versus rights of the unborn, right to control over your body versus the right of the child. You know, so they're explaining both perspectives. Pro-choice activists maintain, regardless of individual circumstances, women have the right to choose or not whether to abort. Because the labor affects her body, it's her right. Pro-life supporters believe that the unborn child has the right to life and that abortion unlawfully takes away that right. So you can see how they're addressing both sides. Okay, and then again, you'll probably have multiple paragraphs. You know, have a paragraph that talks about the pro-life perspective on religion, or maybe multiple ones, maybe 2 paragraphs on pro-life and 2 paragraphs on pro-choice and religious beliefs. And then the conclusion is still the same also. So it's this middle part that you get to choose how you want to address the issue. But remember, a clear organization makes it easy for us to read, and therefore more likely that you'll communicate clearly with us. Okay. So I'm going to include this link in the chat, and I'll post it later on Brightspace. Yeah, for the first draft, you just need 3 pages. So that's the link if you want to look at the example. But do remember, you are narrowing the topic area and expanding the discussion using evidence. That was just a sort of basic, very basic example of how you would organize it. Any questions about it? Good so far. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is, remember when we started talking about the writing process, one of the things you do when you revise, like you're going to revise your current draft after today, is you add examples, evidence, and explanations of your thinking. Okay, so the explanations of your thinking is important because it's one trait that a lot of people leave out in a research paper, and that means you have to explain how the evidence is relevant to your topic. So let's take a look at how you do that. I'm going to share my screen here again. Okay, so in order to use the evidence effectively, as it says, you have to integrate it smoothly, whether you're quoting, whether you're paraphrasing, like we talked about. Okay, you state your claim. Many pro-life activists use religion as a basis, saying that biblically it's against God's law to abort. Then you give evidence. So maybe you cite a Bible passage, okay, that relates to the claim. But the part that a lot of people forget is to comment on the evidence to show how it supports your claim. And I call this connecting the dots, okay? It means if I look at a piece of evidence, unless you tell me how to view it, I may come to a completely different conclusion than you have come to. So you need to guide me using your perspective on it and your view of the evidence. It's the same way we kind of talked about, like the debates. I could say President Trump won the debate because he talked about Hunter Biden and all of the corruption that the Biden family is involved in. Okay, but I don't explain how that relates, how it connects to him being qualified as president. Somebody else might look at that same fact and say, Biden won the debate because all Trump did was talk about his family and unverified claims about, because people have different perspectives, right? So here's an example, a weak use of evidence. Today we're too self-centered. Most families no longer sit to eat together, preferring instead to eat on the go while rushing to the next appointment. Everything is about what we want, okay? This is not explaining how the fact that families don't eat together connects with self-centeredness. It's just assuming that you will have the same conclusion that the person who found this evidence will, okay? So here's the addition of the clear connection where you explain, okay? So here's the claim. Today, Americans are too self-centered, right? So you've got the claim. Even our families don't matter as much as they once did. Other people and activities take precedence. Evidence shows most families no longer eat together, preferring to eat on the go, rushing to the next appointment, okay? So this is the evidence. So you've got your claim, you've got the evidence, and now we're going to go in and say, here's how this piece of evidence supports my claim, okay? Here's how I see it connecting. Sit-down meals are a time to share and connect with others. However, that connection has become less valued as families begin to prize individual activities over shared time, promoting self-centeredness over group identity. So then they bring in their claim and show how the self-centeredness is connecting to families not eating together anymore. Okay. Now we can clearly see how you're using the evidence to support what you're saying. Okay. Here's another example of using the quotations. Okay. You have to be careful to integrate it so it sounds like a normal sentence. So today we are too self-centered. We are consumers on the run. The very notion of family as a sit-down occasion is vanishing. There's no signal phrase. They just drop this quote in without any wording to introduce it. You always want to have the signal phrase that we talked about. That's like according to Gleck, according to the study, where you signal to us that you're about to give us some evidence. Okay. So again, we go back to the claim. Today, Americans are too self-centered. Our families don't matter as much. And then here we go with the signal phrase, as James Gleck says in his book, Faster. Okay. Then they incorporate the quote. This really should be a colon here. You want to connect the signal phrase to the quote. Sit-down meals are a time to share and connect with others. And then again, back to explaining how that piece of evidence, that quote, connects and supports the point that you're trying to make. This is calling it a lead-in phrase. It can be called a signal phrase. Those things are interchangeable. Again, notice, because they mentioned his name in the writing, all they had to put at the end was the page number. See where the period is right here? This is the only case in English where you won't have the period inside the quotation marks. If you don't have in-text citations, normally the period would be between the Y and the closing quotation marks. So this is what it would look like if you mention his name, and we saw up here what it looks like if you don't mention his name. These are the two forms of in-text citations. Citing in the text as you use it so that it can connect with your source work cited at the end, that page you have that lists all of the information needed to get back to the source. You don't list it in your paper because we will have the last page to refer to, and you don't want to interrupt the flow of your writing. Questions? And this process where you basically go through and give evidence that supports your reasons, I call it the lasagna method. All right. So let's take a look. This handout is on Brightspace, and right now it's on the announcements. It's also under the content. Second, I'm going to share my screen here. So it has a basic format. After you settle on your thesis, you need to show us the sources that led you to your opinion. That's what a research paper is. It's built based on research and evidence. If you're not finding research and evidence, it's probably not a good topic for a research paper. Okay. So you're going to have all the elements we talked about. An introduction technique. Okay. So be on the lookout for a great story, description, quote, statistic that could get the reader's attention. Background information on your issue. If it's a controversy, chances are we don't all know the details of it. Okay. 3 to 5 reasons you believe your thesis to be true. In this case, 3 to 5 reasons probably on one side of your issue and on the other. Later on, when we get to the other side, you'll talk about the opposition points. So it's basically layers, right? Your intro, background, thesis, all in the first part. Okay. The first reason you believe your thesis is true. Okay. That people disagree about abortion. So then you say pro-life activists believe this. Then you provide evidence that shows how you came to that conclusion. Then you explain how that evidence supports that conclusion, right? Rinse and repeat. Okay. So when we get to the persuasive paper, here's my research question. Are school dress code policies sexist? My thesis, the answer to that question, the school's dress codes are sexist and frequently discriminate against girls. So in my intro, I use a story about a girl sent home from school for wearing clothes that are too distracting to the boys. One girl was recently sent home because her collarbones were showing. So my first reason is girls are more frequently targeted for violating dress code policies, even if they're dressed in the same manner as the boys are. My evidence, girls have lots more rules. Then I have to show some evidence of that, like in school books or statistics, okay? And then I tell them, how should you view this evidence, okay? When a girl is accused of being distracting because someone can see her legs or collarbone, it sends the message that what she wears can cause her to be ogled or assaulted. Basically, it's her fault if someone's unable to control his actions because of how she dresses. Okay, so if I establish that the dress code policies are accusing girls of distracting people, okay, where it's essentially directing them that they're in charge of other people's behavior, okay? So that's the part that most people miss, and you may not have it yet in your research paper. Explain how your evidence supports your conclusions, if you have not already done so. That's what makes really strong research papers. Weak papers are just like, here's a claim, I'll throw some evidence at you, and then I'll move on. A really good paper that belongs to you is going to show how you look at and interpret the evidence and why you chose it to support the point. There's got to be a reason you chose to put that piece of evidence there. Share it with us. Share what you think it means and its significance. Any questions? Let me give you guys that link also to using evidence. So that's the one that shows when somebody gives you a piece of evidence, but they don't really explain the connection between the claim and the evidence. And then it has the example of the stronger one that explains the connection, right? So you can see the difference, and you can be on the lookout for it in your paper and make sure that you're explaining your evidence. All right, let's talk some more about those lead-in or signal phrases. Whatever you like to call them, the terms are interchangeable. So here are some models. If you get stuck for a way to introduce evidence, so this is the Purdue OWL. Like I said, it's one of my favorite websites to go to. So it's just got some models. Doe declares, he argues, he believes, he shows, he indicates, implies, suggests, thinks, addresses. Okay. Use the correct verb that is to match what you think the evidence does, right? To what the author is doing. Okay. Or you can do, he refutes the claim, or he disputes the evidence. So like it says here, they're called signal phrases, or in some cases lead-in phrases. So whenever you have some evidence that comes from a source, you're always going to tell us that you are about to drop it in there from a source by signaling it with one of these phrases. And these phrases do a couple different things. This is the basic, but they also introduce the credibility of your source. So remember the Jacques Cousteau paraphrasing that we did? So I think they might have called him a researcher, oceanographer, something like that. So they say, you know, Jacques Cousteau, oceanographer. Because otherwise, if you just say Bill Smith says that we should all endorse this candidate for Senate, then we're like, who is Bill Smith? Why do I care what he thinks? Why is he an expert on this topic? So one of the functions of the signal or lead-in phrase is to identify the authority of your source. Whether it's a website or a person, you know, if it's something that's recognized like the American Academy of Pediatrics or the American Heart Association or some other organizations that we might be familiar with, the Johns Hopkins Institute website, or Dr. Anthony Fauci, epidemiologist and expert on the coronavirus. It just gives us an idea of who that person is in case we're not familiar with it, or remind us of why they have a right to talk about the topic, whether they're a website or a person, okay, or some other type of source, government publication, statistic. You know, it comes from a credible source. You're showing that in the signal phrase. So I'd like to do some more practice on that introduction using the paraphrasing. So let's go back. We did the Jacques Cousteau example. Let's go do another one on that page. Did the one from the 20s, right? Let's start with a short one. And again, I'm going to break you guys up into your groups. And this time I'd like to make sure that you use the signal phrase to introduce it. So at the bottom, you'll see it starts, of the more than 1,000 bicycling deaths each year, 3/4 are caused by head injuries, okay? And then at the end, you don't have an author, right? So what do you do if you don't have an author? How do you use it in the in-text citation, or how do you cite it? Anybody know? There are two ways you can do it. You can say, according to the article. Yes, exactly. Very good, Lizzie. So you can put it in your actual writing, according to the article, bike helmets, unused lifesavers, and then you can put the information in. Or, right, you got the title, and then you have the information from the article. So that's one way to do it. Or at the end, you abbreviate the title. So at the end, you would have, if you don't mention it in your writing, okay, you would have bike helmets abbreviated. don't use the whole title because that can get long and unwieldy and interrupt the flow of your writing. But if you didn't already mention it in your signal phrase, that's what you would put at the end of the sentence. Then I can still take that piece of information, go to your works cited page, right, and look it up and find the source information that I need to get back to it if I want to, and verify your statistics or get some more information from it if I need it for a different purpose. Okay, so you can do that either of the two ways. Let's do this one together so that I don't break you into groups and have to put you back in the groups when we come back from our break. So let's take it step by step. We're going to paraphrase. So everybody put the first sentence in your own words. Sorry to hear that, Reagan. So let's start with the first sentence. How can we put that in our own words? Of the more than 1,000 bicycling deaths each year, 3/4 are caused by head injuries. There's more than one right way to do it. Let's start with the signal phrase, right? According to bike helmets. Now, if you're going to put it in your writing, you have to use the whole title. It's not a really long title, so it's not too bad to use it in the signal phrase. Some of them can be really long, and that's when you might want to put it at the end in the abbreviated form. So according to bike helmets, unused lifesavers could reverse it. Remember, you can use words from the originals. There's not another good term, right? Otherwise, find a word that means the same thing. So what's another way to say 3/4? What would it be if we converted it into a percentage? Yes, thank you, Jason. So we could say 75% bicycle deaths so 75% of the 1,000 bicycling deaths see. Hold on, I gotta check the original, make sure I'm not changing it. Results from, we could say injuries to the head, but head injuries would be okay in this case. So let's take a look at it. This is the first sentence. We've got the signal phrase that clearly identifies where it came from and warns our audience we're about to drop in source information, right? So according to bike helmets, unused lifesavers, 75% of the 1,000 bicycling deaths, I would add the in between of and the 1,000 bicycling deaths result from head injuries each year. So again, it's a draft. It's a shitty first draft. I would have to go back. I would have to tweak it. I would have to make sure I add in all the words that I need, right? Now, the great thing is you don't have to cite it again if you're still talking about the same passage and you make that clear. So you say something like, the article also says, then you don't have to cite the article in the in-text citation again, as long as we're clear you're still talking about the same source, right? So the next sentence says, half of those killed are school-aged children. Okay. So the article also says 50% of those deaths are children. Okay. You can say children in school or school-aged children. Again, I think you can get away with using that from the original. So it would read in your paper, according to bike helmets, unused lifesavers, 75% of the 1,000 bicycling deaths each year result from head injuries. The article also says 50% of those deaths are children who are still in school, however you want to put it. One study concluded that wearing a bike helmet can reduce the risk of head injury by 85%. What do you think? Somebody put that in your own words. Translate that. Everybody give it a shot in the comments. Put this sentence in your own words.
That specific sentence, or like those,
That specific.
like the
Yeah, the
entirety
one
of
that
what you just
says,
said.
yeah, just the one that says one study concluded. Actually, we're about to run out of time, so work on that over the break, and we'll come back at 8:45, and you can post your rewording of the sentence. So copy and paste it in this last couple minutes we have here and work on it. Then I'm going to end the session and we'll come back at 8:45. Everybody got it?
Is everybody going to a breakout room?
No, right now we're going on break. When we come back, we'll go to breakout rooms for a new paraphrase. But right now we're all working on this one together. So just work on this rewording sentence, one study concluded. All right, I'm going to end the session. See you after break at 8:45.